everyone. My name is Dr. Simon Kay. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Meetings with Mayors, our big flagship series here at Restate of conversations with England's metro mayors, or, well, is metro the right word for all of the mayors these days? Probably not anymore, is it? No. This is a new model of leadership, one that's changing the country one region, one place at a time. It's already changing things, already delivering things in different corners of the country. And where it's up and running, it's running up against the limits of the system and the challenges in the system that predate the existence of directly elected mayors. This time, I'm delighted to be joined by Kim McGuinness, who's the mayor of the North East Combined Authority. Before I turn to Kim in just a moment, devolution to mayors should be seen as one of the biggest experiments in governance in England for decades. Directly elected people with personal mandates from the public. It's just not part of the usual DNA of how politics and policy works in this country. And as a result, the mayors in those roles are turning out to be really quite disruptive. They're changing things. They've got influence beyond the letter of their mandate in lots of contexts. And really strikingly, they don't tend to be very ideological. We'd be interested to find out whether that's true today as well. So these sessions are all about getting under the bonnet of the mayoral model across England, what the job is like in practice, what's distinctive about this kind of leadership at the regional or sub-regional scale, today specifically the Northeast, what the next phase, the next evolution of devolution should be in this country if we want that momentum to keep going and if we think this is an experiment that's worth continuing. Cards on the table, I think it is one, but let's see what the angles are. So very big welcome to our guest, Kim McGuinness.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And I've been looking forward to this session for ages. So it's brilliant to have you join us today. So it's not really a traditional interview, Kim, as you know. I'm just going to put things to you and we'll see where the conversation takes us a bit. If people want to put some questions in the chat, you'll see a little chat feature at the bottom of the screen there. Please do feel free to contribute things there. And this recording will then be shared on in a number of different media afterwards, where it'll have its sort of second life and wider audience. But thank you to everyone joining us live today. So I like to start in the same place each time, Kim, which is to think about your motivation, what brought you to where you are as a mayor today. Looking at your backstory, you've been a councillor, cabinet member, you've been PCC, and now you're mayor. So what made you want to take on this, what I've just described as a very specific kind of role, and to be the mayor of the Northeast in particular?
Well, two things. So I'm from here, born and raised. I'm from a working class background. I grew up in the West End of Newcastle. And I think we are a place that has been for too long overlooked and underinvested in. And I wanted to change that. And so it's really simple. I'm unbelievably proud of where I'm from. I'm unbelievably proud of the people here. I think that it's the best place in the world. And I think this is a unique opportunity to make it better. I got into politics in general completely by accident. You know, I've got a story a lot like a lot of women in politics, which is I basically had to be asked by somebody else, told that I could do it and encouraged on by another woman. But once I've got there, you know, my ambition for the place here and the people is huge. And I've, as you have already said, I've kind of been a councillor. I served on the cabinet at Newcastle for culture, sport and public health. I then went on to become police and crime commissioner, which was all about tackling the causes of crime and prevention and looking at how we create opportunity in order to prevent crime. And through that process, we as a region entered into the devolution process. And frankly, I'm a devolutionist. You know, I think the country's too centralised. I've never had ambitions or ever wanted to go into Parliament. I want to change the way this country's run. So it's those two things, really: a love of the place, the people, and a desire to make it better. And then, you know, I want to see the way this country is run change.
There's something striking about one of the first things you're saying here, that you feel like the Northeast is an overlooked part of the country. And I think that one of the things I've noticed, and this was reinforced a bit while I was doing my reading in preparation for this conversation, is that people tend to sort of pigeonhole it or use a sort of a shorthand about it. So I've seen documents in just the last few days saying the post-industrial Northeast or the left behind Northeast, proud, resilient. There's a lot of sort of tags that get applied to your
Tropes, I think
patch,
so. You're
aren't
doing
they?
well. Yeah.
But does that drive you a bit crazy? It's reductive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is reductive. And sometimes it does drive me a bit crazy because actually some of the greatest innovations that we have to our name came out of this region. The railway, the light bulb. I could go on, and we are known for making things, sending things all over the world. We still are known for that. This is an incredible place, and yes, the people are resilient. Yes, the people are positive, extremely proud, but we've achieved everything we've achieved despite a critical lack of investment. And I think one of the best arguments for devolution is places like mine, where we are the furthest English region away from Westminster, and you can feel it. And so we don't want pity, we don't want the crumbs off the table. I can't stand the way that often the media overlook that pride and that real focus of the people here. But at the same time, we've got to address the imbalance and we've got to really go for it. Shout about our achievements, shout about, yes, our heritage, but actually our future and our ambitions. And I think that's what the people of the Northeast ultimately want. They want to see positive moves and change. They want to see investment. They want to see us to be considered as important as London or Manchester or Leeds, because what there is here, it's the best. It's the best place. Honestly, I think it's the best place in the world.
Well, I mean, I guess you would say that, but it's nice to hear. Nice to hear
Yeah,
that perspective.
I am obviously very biased, but you just have to strip it back to its brass tacks. We've got three incredible cities, countless fantastic towns, a coastline that's unrivaled, I think, anywhere in the world, countryside that goes for miles, and it is just so incredibly beautiful. And as I said, some of the most incredible industrial heritage and culture, but all of the components like world leading universities and research institutions, unbelievably resilient and fantastic businesses doing innovative things, trading all over the world. You only have to look at the brass tacks to see how incredible this place is and what an opportunity it is, not just for the people here, but for Britain in general. And I think one of the things that I would reflect on, and you sort of touched on it being reductive, is we are also a place that's been focused on when it comes to things like Brexit, post-Brexit. We are the place that's been focused on when it comes to, discussion about the Red Wall and all of those things. And what you get is London-based journalists will traipse up here, they'll come for a day, they'll stand in a street that looks run down, they'll stop a couple of people and basically ask them to tell them how shit it is. And then they won't stay for the next bit of the sentence, which is, yeah, but I love it and I'm really proud and I want it to be better. And, that is generally the attitude of the people here. If I go out in the street now and say, are you proud of where you're from? They'll say, I love it. And they'll tell me 10 things they love.
I think so. You're right. There's a journalistic thing going on there. There's also this isn't just sort of about the annoyance of the labeling that we're talking about. This must have an actual implication for your job because
Yeah.
part of what you have to do is be sort of the prime interlocutor, the person who connects your region with Westminster and Whitehall, which is famously the bubble of Westminster and Whitehall. I mean, how many of the people in Whitehall who deal with you and with the people you work with in the combined authority, how many of the politicians you work with in Westminster basically only really think about the Northeast in terms of they might have a friend who went to Durham or something for you. There's that kind of that. Is that a dotted line? Am I overdoing it, or is that
No, you're not.
actually an
You
active?
get that all the time. You kind of meet civil servants and people in Whitehall and Westminster, and they'll go, "Oh, I know the Northeast really well. I went to university there," or my brother or my sister went to university there, and it most wonderful time as a student, because we all know this is a bloody great place to be a student, but it needs more than that. And so for me, hammering down the door is a very natural thing, because everything I'm saying to those people is just A, nothing but the truth, and B, exactly what the people here want to see, which is a change to that order, investment here first, a real drive to grow the Northeast. And that pride, the pride that I talk about, I quite often will talk about the pride of the people in the Northeast in speeches or in interviews and things like this. And during my campaign, when I was running to be mayor, it was a real fundamental part of I suppose, the story that we wanted to tell about the region. And one of the things that we told people we really wanted to highlight. And some of my political opponents made fun of it. You know, they consider it to be intellectually lightweight or politically lightweight. I am telling you now, the pride of these people in this region is our biggest economic asset. Because what it means is every single one of them that goes out there, they go on holiday, they go to other places in the world, they travel for work, you know, they travel for pleasure, whatever they're doing. Every single one of these people is going out there and telling the world how great this place is. That pride is our biggest economic asset. And so, you know, taking that and using it as the economic asset it is to batter down the doors in Whitehall and Westminster and say, you know, we need more investment, that's working for us. We're starting to see it. We're starting to see us be alongside, you know, those areas that have been devolved longer, the areas that we're used to seeing in these big policy announcements. You know, we got £1.85 billion for our transport settlement. That's the biggest that we've ever had. Last week, we announced that we'll be getting a new railway line in County Durham. We are finally being listened. We've got the first AI growth zone. You know, we are finally being listened to. And long may it continue.
I want to touch on something you're sort of taking us towards anyway, which is that it's not there's the job we're sort of starting to talk about here about your role representing for your region, getting a better deal for your region in a centralized system in Westminster and Whitehall. There's also, I think, increasingly this pattern of mayors essentially having to be the international ambassador for their place and going abroad. You recently did a trip to Japan, I saw, and which sounds like it was a big success. You can you'd be interested to hear about your reflections on that. But essentially, banging the drum for that aspect of the economic development of what needs to happen where you are. And I think I found a quote where you essentially suggested that it's a competitive environment, that if you're going to have mayors from other regions out there banging their drums, it'd be a massive mistake for you not to do so. And I think that's an aspect of this mayoral role that people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, and I don't think it's, when I say competitive, I think it's globally competitive. I make no apology for the fact that, you know, we went to Japan. We had an incredible trade mission. We made a deal with Hitachi on battery power and on green energy. One of the businesses that we took there and highlighted have received investment since our trip. We have made an announcement on a music partnership between Tokyo and the Northeast. So we are getting traction with that. And green energy was the fundamental part of that trade mission. Because I tell you, you know what, if Donald Trump doesn't want green energy investment in the States and they want to turn their back on it, we'll have it in the UK and we'll have it in the Northeast because there's nowhere better to do it. So yes, I think the job is multifold. You know, yes, it's about getting what we deserve out of Westminster, the settlement, devolving more power, taking more power away unapologetically from Westminster and Whitehall and handing it directly to the people here so that they can, you know, keep me in or kick me out if they think I don't do a good enough job at that. Second, it's being an ambassador for the region and when it comes to trade and investment and attraction and tourism and all of those things. But most importantly, it's about delivery for these people. These are executive functions. We deliver transport, we deliver skills, we deliver housing, we deliver those core services. And increasingly, you know, we're going to be delivering things like public service reform and all of those things. We're delivering here on reducing child poverty. We have to deliver for the communities that are directly electing mayors. And so it's all of those things. And it's ever evolving because we are essentially the first tranche of people doing this.
Exactly. It's the model. You're developing the model that will get used elsewhere. And that's what's so striking about this moment that we're in right now. Can I zoom in on this delivery point? Because it's come up in some of the previous conversations I've had with mayors, which is that there are some mayors who definitely do not see themselves as delivery people. They see themselves as strategic, and that, of course, that's baked into the new name that you're all going to be used by henceforward, right? Strategic authority. It's a constitutional commitment. A lot of the mayors I spoke to, though, are more, I'm guessing, in your camp, where it's no, we're here to deliver for people. People need to see us do that. And I think what might happen is that the more that we believe that mayors need to be responsible and accountable for delivering outcomes, the more frustrated you guys are going to get because you don't have all the levers you need to do the delivery. Is that true?
No, yes and no. So first of all, I think you can be both. And I think we are both, so we own the growth plan for the region. That is a strategic document, but it is also absolutely critical that we deliver the outcomes in it. And that means delivering more investment, more jobs in the core sectors that are highlighted, tackling the social issues directly that are highlighted in the growth plan. So get the strategic objectives, the strategic outcomes, so that essentially people know that they can get a good job in the region, they don't have to leave, they can earn a good living, they can raise their living standards, and the area will improve. So I make no apology for the fact both. It's absolutely, definitely, you are a strategic leader for the region. At the same time, you've got to deliver, because we are entrusted with executive functions. We have to deliver transport. There's no mayor sat out there going, well, I'll strategize transport. You have to deliver it. If the trains aren't running on time, people are they're ringing you. And so that is really, really important. And actually, I think the democratization of those public services is really important to local people. They want to be able to have a say. They want a person who they can go to and say, this isn't working, please fix it. And I totally understand that, as an area, again, that hasn't had the investment. But of course, we're going to push for more power and more delivery capacity. And I think that's two reasons. It's not because we're power hungry and because we want to be more important and more responsible for more things. It's because, exactly you said, you need the levers you can pull to make the change for people. The other thing that I would observe, and it's a conversation that I have with government all the time, is we are designed to do this in a way that government isn't. We are newer, more nimble, smaller, more agile organisations that by their very design are able to adapt and change and pilot and deliver and try things and, do it quicker than government. Government it's an oil tanker, rightly or wrongly. I have countless friends who have gone into, government for the first time, whether as a backbencher or dare I say it, in the seats of power. And they're frustrated. They're openly talking about it. They want to be able to do things quicker. Government is a hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old institution. These are new, and they're built to do this. And so, as a vehicle, devolving more power into regions means that things get done quicker. People feel the difference quicker. People know that there was a direct impact. They wanted this to happen. Their mayor went to government. They got the power to do it. They got it done, and now they feel it.
I think the logic of what you've just said, though, also takes us into new territories for powers, doesn't it? Because just as someone might rightly call you up and be like, well, call you or your team up and ask about the state of the transport around here or something along those lines, I think as the most visible single politician within the region, which I think you probably are, maybe alongside a few high-profile MPs, and will increasingly, I think all mayors will become more high-profile, more visible over time. You're also going to be sort of on the hook for stuff that technically isn't in your domain. So people are going to be, if they're not already, harassing you on the street about what's going on with the bins and stuff like that on the one end, and probably stuff that's happening in central government and sits within the Whitehall control on the other hand. So the logic that I think has emerged from some of these conversations is the idea that it seems inevitable that over the next 5 or 10 years, there'll be a huge amount of pressure for mayors to get their fingers and thumbs in all sorts of pies that aren't on the black and white of the piece of paper that describes what their authorities are for. Now, I don't know if that's something you'd welcome or something you think is inevitable, but do you agree with that?
I don't think that's a new thing. People contact their MPs about bins, but MPs have got absolutely nothing to do with bins. People contact their council about benefits that are delivered by central government. That council don't have anything to do with that. I don't think that people have really busy lives. And I think it's really easy when you live and breathe politics and governance and government and all of that kind of stuff that you think other people just know. Why on earth would they, if every day their life is about looking after their kids and going to work and earning the money and putting the food on the table and seeing their friends and having a social life. It isn't about what we do and who's responsible for what. And so I think that's kind of Taylor's Order's time. And if you are higher profile, of course, you get more of it. But I think there's just sensible ways to navigate that. And yes, so some of it is just how you effectively triage that, direct people in the right way, support people to get the outcomes that they want. And some of it will naturally be about, saying to government, I've lost count of how many times people have said that we should be responsible for this, so make us responsible for it. So I think I don't think I don't think it's unreasonable, and I don't think that we should ever expect people to know the ins and outs of government. It's not for them. It's for us to manage that, and it's completely manageable. And I always understand people's frustration. Sometimes by the time they've come to me, they might well have been to their councillor. They might well have been to, the the office responsible for it. They might even been to an MP. They might have been to the police. They might have been to somewhere else. And our job collectively across the system is to support people, to help people, to help fix their problems.
It sounds like you're up for that in a way that maybe your immediate neighbour Ben Houchin, for example, isn't. So when I had this conversation with him, he sort of said, "Well, no, look, there are areas where I think we can make a huge difference, and then there are areas where we have to just sort of say, sorry, mate, wrong bit."
Well, I mean, I wouldn't put it like that. I don't think that we don't ever send someone packing and say that's not our job. We've got a team that will help people to find the right place, to find the right avenue. But I don't shy away from a conversation that goes, look, these are the things that I'm responsible for, and these are the things that I'm not. But equally, I'll hammer down the doors of government for more control, for example, over things like, I think we should control Arts Council funding. I don't know why there is that quango. I don't know why it isn't devolved. There's an ongoing conversation continually about post-16 education, the fact that we have post-19 education, we want post-16 education. Mayors believe that we will be able to make a better economic impact and worklessness and support more people to get into the careers that they really deserve by taking those powers. So there's always going to be things that we hammer the door of government down and say we would be better placed to deliver that. There's also always going to be better things that should be hyper-local, should be with your council. And when people are asking us or frustrated about it, it's our job to just help them on their way. It isn't, I'm not an it's not my job person. And I guess, I don't know, maybe it's because I was a councillor. There's not many of us who came through local government yet, and it's changing. So my colleague Helen in the west of England, she did. Steve Rotherham was a councillor. I think it was many years ago, but he was a councillor. And I think that time spent at a ward level, knowing what those day-to-day frustrations are like, I think it molds the way you do your job, doesn't it?
When you're right about Helen for sure. When I spoke to Claire Ward right at the beginning of this series, it became very clear that she doesn't really think of herself as a part of local government. So she didn't come through from local government. She sees herself as being something that's not central government, something that's not local government. It's an entirely new thing.
I agree with that.
Is that what you think?
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we are a completely new layer. And I think increasingly people feel and think regionally. I always think it's really interesting when you see parts of either government or you see parts of local government or central government getting territorial over either stuff that they're responsible for or localities that they're responsible for. The people you serve are not thinking about these things. They're not thinking about when they travel between North Tyneside and Newcastle or Sunderland, South Tyneside. They're not thinking about what department of government is responsible for skills versus what's responsible for benefits. Of course they're not. They just want their problem solved. And so I think that regional outlook, that strategic outlook, but with the ability to be small and nimble enough to deliver is a new thing for this country, but it's absolutely the right direction of travel. It's the right thing for us to be doing.
What you've just said, I think, leads us to something else I really wanted to ask you about, which is just sort of the sheer diversity of the Northeast. Obviously, Northeast is growing, right? It's become a larger combined authority from when it was North Tyne. It's a diverse place because of its scale to some extent, but also just because it's a diverse place. You've got town, you've got country, you've got coastal, you've got innovative, you've got industrial, you've got post-industrial, you've got the whole range of socioeconomic. You've also increasingly got the full range of political perspective that you have to work with. Does that make being mayor a bit like balancing on a tightrope every day?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's a real natural thing about the geography of the Northeast. So there was some research out recently, and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember who did it. It might have been the Institute for Government. I'm not sure, but it was about regional identities, and with the exception of Scotland, which is a different country, the people with the strongest regional identity were the Northeast. People recognise this as a place in itself, in all of its diversity. And so, notwithstanding everything I just said about people not thinking about the boundaries, I've got 7 local authorities, 3 cities, countless towns, 2.1, 2.2 million people, 3,500 square miles, 22 parliamentary constituencies. It is massive, geographically massive. But there is an overwhelming identity, and I'll go back to that pride thing. And so you will always naturally get why is all the money going to Newcastle? Why is all the money going to Sunderland? Why is all the money? And people will want more for their own area. But I'd consider that to be a good thing, actually. If they're not snapping at my heels saying, deliver more for us, then, what am I for? They should be. That's the whole point in the thing.
I guess the kind of diversity that you're going to have as a sort of a daily aspect of your role increasingly is the political one. Your constituent authorities. Well, what have you got now? You've got
I've got
Reform
5
in County
Labour,
Durham,
1
Labour in
yeah.
Gateshead,
5
Tories
Labour,
in
1
Northumberland.
Tory, 1 Reform at the moment.
And I think we can expect after May some change to that picture.
Yeah.
Someone's just put a question in the chat saying mayoral cabinets are going to become more politically colourful come May.
Mhm.
I think that's true, isn't it?
It
How
is.
much of this is a kind of an aspect of how you get your job done? How much is it a constraint on how you can get your vision through?
Well, I guess we'll see. Devolution is evolving, and kind of the layers of where the power sits is evolving. My view is, and this is a view that I put very strongly to government, I have a direct mandate from the people of this region. I have a direct mandate to deliver things like, for example, bus reform, to deliver on child poverty, to deliver more housing. The things that I stood on very clearly in a manifesto and people voted me in to deliver. I don't think it is reasonable or right that a cabinet should be able to stop me from delivering a thing that the people of the Northeast voted for. And that is a thing that I will stand by, whether it's in negotiation with government about the next phases of devolution, or whether it is with a cabinet of any colour. But at the same time, mayors are, by our very nature, generally pretty cross-party. You're delivering for your region. And so, yes, of course, I have Labour values. And yes, of course, you look at that manifesto, it will look like more public control. It will look like some left-wing policy. But on a whole, I spend my days serving the people of this region and delivering for them. And I'll work with anybody who wants to do that. I'll work with anybody as long as they're fair and even-handed, because I don't think that the politics of it should be getting in the way of improving things for people. And so, trying to slow down an agenda, trying to for political benefit, I think is, that's, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty cardinal sin in local politics. And so I'd like to hope that whatever cabinet are elected have the best interests of the region at heart. And I'd like to hope that anybody who stands on their own mandate at a local level will recognise the direct mandate of a mayor who was elected by the people to deliver something.
I that's so fascinating because it chimes with the idea that I kind of just sort of alluded to at the beginning, that to be a good mayor, you kind of have to be less political than perhaps a good MP might be.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you think of yourself as sort of less political?
Less big P political for sure. You're region first, party second for sure. And there's no risk. You're not asked to. There's nobody telling me what I have to deliver and what I have to. I don't vote, but what I have to vote for or anything along those lines. So yes, in that sense, and I will sit round the table with those leaders as a cabinet, regardless of their politics. And I hope that you can always at least get stuff done for people.
I've kind of
the other thing, on that as well, is you do also sometimes have to take government on, regardless of the colour of government.
Right.
And
that's something that you have to be prepared to do. But I suppose not every politician would be.
Exactly, you've got to be prepared to do it, and I think they've got to be prepared to accept it. And I think that's kind of the change that we're starting to see happen. They are, they're adapting to that. I think that's only right.
Is that something that's coming out in the meetings of the Council of Regions and Mayors and Nations when you sit down in that long room with lots of different faces? Is that
I
a
find
forum where disagreement happens?
Yeah, I mean, constructive disagreement. I don't think disagreement. I actually think that what we're starting to see happen, and we saw this through the process of the recent announcements on rail, is that it's a much more working together type environment than I think has ever happened before. I always would say that I think the relationship between regions and government under the Conservatives last time round, the earlier inception of devolution was quite parent and child. Mayor would ask government for power, government would find 10 reasons why not to give that power. Mayor was pretty powerless to do anything other than shout. And now there's much more of a negotiated state, and much more of a mutuality to the conversation, a kind of grown up to grown up relationship that is much better for the people of the regions. And that, I think, is the evolution of the devolution process.
Mm. And speaking as a former councillor, on looking at the other side of that, there's an extent to which strategic combined authorities don't just pull powers out of Whitehall; they sometimes pull some of these responsibilities up from local government. From your face, I suspect agree with that.
Yeah.
But is there a selling that needs to be going on there back to local governments? This is worthwhile. This is going to be helpful.
It's really interesting because the Northeast, I think, had a bit of a checkered history with devolution. So, as you alluded to, there was previously a North of Tyne. That's because a previous negotiation that included the South of Tyne authorities just fell apart. And I think there was always that fear of this sort of big bag authority in the shadow of something new overpowering local government, and the absolutely necessary place that local government has in delivering at a hyper-local level for neighbourhoods. That's not what devolution's for. It is to bring power down from government, from decentralising. It doesn't mean you can't lift pressure off local authorities, though, sometimes. And I think sometimes lifting the pressure off when it comes to, for example, developing more brownfield land so that we can build more houses or get more businesses away. Things like injecting the powers and the energy and the investment that comes with something like a mayoral development corporation or zone. These enhance local government. They don't take anything away from local government. And I think because our leaders spent an awful lot of time together during COVID, and it's a totally different cast list now, but of course they were the ones that did this deal. And because there had been that fallout in the past, I don't feel very much like I've ever had to sell it to the leaders here. Naturally, they will all want to make sure that their area is getting the investment they deserve and getting their kind of rightful injection of support, whatever that looks like. But they totally get that when they sit around that cabinet table, they have a regional role. That they're there to support each other as much as their own area, and that we don't do a divide by seven. We point the power in the places where it really needs to happen, so that kind of all boats rise. So I've not really felt like that, and I hope it continues like that, because that cross-party ability to work across the region is reaping rewards already, and I think the leaders understand that and feel it.
It's fascinating. I think with the time left on the clock, I should probably do justice to some of the questions that are popping up in the chat, if that's all right, Kim. James Arrowsmith has joined us and asks about health devolution, and the regionalisation of health with ICBs, the new concept for regionalised social care with RCCs. Do you have an ambition to take more control of health powers? I know some combined authorities and some mayors are. Or do you think there's a job to be done here just to make sure that these things align with each other and that you have a proper conversation with those entities in your region?
I mean, I think it's first things first, and that's definitely first. So we're one of the areas that's not coterminous. So our boundaries don't line up with the health authorities and with the ICB and all of that. And so that makes it trickier for there to be more devolution without things changing. And so I think first things first. And I'm going to be honest, and I'm always honest, I'm pretty open-minded about health devolution. I am always one for banging the drum for powers that I think that we could deliver better, quicker, improve things. I think people deserve more of a say in the way that health is delivered. And I think, centralized systems make it really difficult for that voice to be there. But I also can see things improving, and we can see things like the waiting lists come down. And so I think there's more of a role for us in public health than in health delivery, but I'm open-minded.
And according to the 10-year plan, there's going to be more public health and more primary care in the mix for health budgets, full stop. So as that changes, the mix of your say in that domain might grow based on the model you've just described, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We've had James Armstrong asking on HS2, how frustrating is it that HS2 doesn't include the Northeast? When will government support the A1 dualling to Scotland? Can Necker take the lead?
So it is frustrating. I mean, we all know that the checkered history of HS2, we were never really properly in the mix. And that was a decision taken a very, very long time ago. I am much more focused, though, on delivering better rail services across the north. I think the announcement we had last week was really positive, particularly as it includes a new railway line for County Durham that will reconnect passengers in places that have been completely disconnected from railways for such a long time. And it fits with our recent announcement on extending the metro as well. So I'm more focused on that than I am on something like HS2. The fact is that we can get from Newcastle to London already in under 3 hours. That's pretty fast. What I want is more capacity on the East Coast Main Line so that we can have more stopping services, so more people inside the region can use it to get to work. And then on the A1, I just agree with him. It's terrible. It should be dualled. I live on that section. And honestly, I've sat there sometimes almost in tears because it is that bad. And I'm dead frustrated about it. And I'll keep banging the drum down. But it is a national highway. It's not something that we have either the power or the money to be able to do inside the region. But we'll keep going. And we are making inroads, excuse the pun. And it's getting upgrades and safety. That's better than nothing. It's not good enough. And we'll keep pushing.
Sounds like that might be an area where you would want to claim a bit more power.
I'd love to. I think that you would get much quicker with more devolution of things like highways, but as it currently stands, it's not something we've got.
Very interesting to note that in the list of things. Kim, I'm sure you've done this deliberately, but you've mentioned the Arts Council, you talked about health. There's been quite a list emerging from this conversation of additional areas. Rima J. Bailey has joined us and asks a very interesting question, actually. How important is listening to the voices of ordinary people? How has that helped you to do things differently and shape what you do? And that's interesting because, of course, at your scale, there's an interesting sort of parallel, isn't there? Because you're directly elected. You're one of the only politicians in the country with that direct personal mandate, but you're also further away from the average citizen than, say, a councillor you were as a councillor. So that direct connection to the voters, how does that work for you?
So I don't think you are further away. I think, like you said, you're sort of pretty recognisable, and people definitely don't shy away from like a conversation with me in the supermarket, and I really like that. I like that people feel that I'm an approachable person to them, and that's exactly as it should be. And I'm really comfortable with that. But we do loads of it to answer the question directly. We do mayor meets type events where I did one just earlier this week with farmers in rural Northumberland. I recently did one in Hexham. We've done them in Sunderland. We've done them in schools. And it's the thing that I enjoy the most because it does give you that direct interface with people to understand, what the things you are doing and how they go down with people, but equally to get that direct feedback and ideas. And similarly, we do a monthly phone in with Radio Newcastle. And the thing that I get the most excited about is when somebody rings with an idea and says, instead of, it's amazing answering questions, I have no problem doing it, but I did one. It was that this. It was last week. I did one last Tuesday, and a woman rang in and she said, why don't you have tourist information boards and interpretation boards in metro stations in the same way as you have on the tube? So why doesn't it say on the tannoy, get off at Tynemouth, Priory and Castle? And it's so simple and so effective and so cheap, and so we're going to do it. And so, it's these things. You can't know everything as a mayor, as a politician of any sort. You can't think of it all. You can't sit in an office and run a region. You've got to get out there. And most of my time spent either on visits to businesses, to communities, to events, or out with the public, because that's how it should be. And I will honestly, unapologetically spend as little time as I physically can sat around a meeting table or in this office.
That's a striking answer. Do you? I'm very conscious of the time, so really quick one from me. Given all of that, do you lie awake at night worrying about turnout levels in mayoral elections? I think one of the big hopes of this model is that it would encourage more and more people to engage and come to. I think the last pattern has been that it went down slightly at the last set of mayoral elections. Why is that, do you think?
I don't lie awake at night thinking about it, if I'm 100% honest. But I think turnout in elections and engagement in elections in general is something that we all need to keep a weather eye on, because democracy is really bloody important to us. And I think personally, votes at 16 is a good thing. I think that will help to engage people when they are still in formal education, and therefore, there is almost that natural reminder through the education system that this is something that is your right as a citizen, your responsibility as a citizen. And so I think that's a real positive thing. But it's our job to get out there and make people feel like they are getting something from us, that it's a worthwhile thing. There are a whole range of things that wouldn't have happened either here or around the country without mayors, and it's our job to tell that story.
All right. Well, with like a minute left on the clock, I'm going to ask my traditional closing question, if that's all right, Kim, which is, if you were talking to someone who wanted to become a mayor, they were maybe in the running to get nominated or to do so, what would your single biggest piece of advice be for that person?
Um, this is a job for a person that cares deeply about the place and the people. And if your motivations are anything else, it's not for you. But if that's the thing that is driving you, then absolutely go for it, because there is not a bigger opportunity in politics, or I think almost anything else, to get the change that people want to see. This is it. This is our opportunity to literally shape and change the way that the country's run. But it's only going to work if we're doing it in the interests of the people we represent.
Thank you for that, Kim McGuinness. Brilliant final answer and a good note to leave it on. Thank you, everyone who tuned in live and asked such interesting questions. Thank you, of course, to Kim McGuinness for giving us her time today and giving us such direct answers. That's certainly been the pattern in these conversations, and one that's really helped the series to flourish. We've got one more in our series coming up, so look out for the details of that coming really soon in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, once more, thank you, Kim McGuinness, and everyone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care.